All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's 2:02. Want to welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Damon Hoyle. I am the Senior Operations Project Manager in the Operations Department in the Strategic Initiatives Division. So with all of that said, one of my primary responsibilities is helping to manage the COVID-19 testing program, which is under the Reopening Schools grant. And we have that broken into two parts, which is the K through 12 COVID-19 testing program, along with the school health support grant. So today, this webinar is going to be specifically focusing on the school health support grant and the reporting requirements that go along with that. And so this is the first monthly reporting window that we've put out there. And so thank you all for being here. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues and maybe a third one as well. So I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. Matt Lashley, Grant Compliance and Administration. Been working with and supporting Damon on this grant. Thank you for joining us today. Jaden, I think you're with us. You want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Jaden Siegler. My title at TA is Special Projects Intern, and I'm assisting Damon and Matt both in this grant. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, definitely shout out to both of these gentlemen who work in our grants department. Wouldn't be as successful and be at where it is right now if it weren't for these two guys. So I'm really appreciative of them being here. And we might have one other colleague joining a little bit later who's also a grants expert as well. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward from there. This is our general disclaimer. I'll let you all read it. I won't read it to you, but it is our general disclaimer in regards to this presentation in this session today. The one thing I will highlight here is the bottom sentence that the presentation materials and anything that we cover today on these slides or that we say before and after doing this presentation might be subject to change. And if it is subject to change, we would update this PowerPoint to make sure that it's republished and that the information is accurate. But as of today, everything that we will share will be on the most accurate information we have as of right now. So I want to say that. Today's agenda. So we're going to do some norms and reminders. Be done with that about 12:05, from 12:05 to 12:25, because we only have an hour. So we really want to say time bound here and time conscious. We'll review the school health support grant reporting form. So we're actually going to go through the document and go through it step by step so that you all can understand each part. And then we're going to do a Q&A part for about 20 minutes just on the reporting document itself. So we have about 20 minutes carved out for that. If it goes a little bit longer, that's fine. If it goes shorter, that's fine. And then we have an additional 15 minutes carved out at the end of this for questions. And my time is actually off. This should say 2:02, but that's so fine. That's okay. I'll update that. But by the end of the hour, the last 15 minutes, we'll answer those, any other general not reopening, but any school health support grant questions that you all might have. I'll update this slide with the correct times. So I'll make a note of that. So norms and reminders, just really quickly. Use the Q&A feature throughout. I see we already have about 14 questions that have come in. You can use that throughout the presentation to ask questions. We are going to answer questions in that 20 minutes at the end of this. So we're going to go through step by step the document, and then we'll answer those questions. Save yourself some time. You can use the keystrokes, and you can, if you want to upvote a question that you have the same question instead of retyping it, you can click on it, and that'll prioritize those questions by the ones that have the most likes or the most hits, and it'll prioritize those based on ranking. So if you see that question, just go ahead and do it that way if it's one that you already intended to ask. I've already talked about how we're going to address questions at the end. We'll address as many questions as we can within the hour. Anything that we can address, we can pull a spreadsheet after this, and we can email folks individually those questions and then send it out as well, be it FAQ or generally to the listserv that we send out this invitation to. So we'll make sure that your questions get answered either in this session or post the session. We are recording. It already has been started recording. So anyone that didn't make it or anyone that wants to go back and review this recording, we will post it later this week within the next 1 or 2 business days. So that way you all can have it before you have to meet the deadline, which is April 30th, which is a Saturday, but we want to give you all the full month at 11:59 p.m. So please be conscious about getting in your report. So with that said, I'm going to move forward. And we're going to jump now into getting into while we're here, which is reviewing the monthly report. So I think I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to let my colleague Matt share his screen because he has the report, and then we'll go from there. I think he's still there. If not, I can. Okay, there we go. All right. Can you make it a little bit bigger for me, Matt? There we go. I wear contacts, and so I want to be sensitive to those of us who, might have some need some extra attention for our vision. Thank you, sir. All right, so you'll see that this link was provided for you all in the email listserv, in the email that was sent out to you all. We sent out a couple of times, and it was also in our weekly test coordinator email. So this is where you will get the link. If you need it again, put it in the chat and put it in the Q&A, and we can send out the link again. But what it'll say at the top is it'll say 2021-2022 COVID-19 School Health Support Grant monthly expenditure report. It is from May 1 of last year. This first reporting window is from May 1 of 2021 because that's the pre-award date, was May 1 of last year, so almost a year ago. You could classify any of those things that fell into the allowables. So from May 1 of last year until April 30th, which is this Saturday up until this year, this is what you'll be classifying. So that's pretty much going to be a year worth of, or 12 months worth of things that you'll be classifying. It is due April 30th, this Saturday at 11:59. We're not saying that you need to work on the weekends. We just want to give you the entire month. The 30th just happened to fall on a Saturday, so we wanted to honor that and also extend it through the Saturday. Instructions. Grantees must use this form to submit required expenditures reports for the indicated expenditure reporting period noted above. So once again, you'll see that language several times in here. For the expenditure, it'll say for the indicated expenditure reporting period above, May 1st of 2021 through April 30th. That is for this report. Include cumulative dollar amounts in every field. So that's what you spent in totality. I know we know what cumulative means, but just in case, in totality, what you spent for that item line on the budget. Do not include special characters, so you do not have to put a dollar sign, but you can put a decimal point to go to the cents. So if it's like $17,321.42, you can put a decimal point and put the 42 cents there. All fields require a number to be entered. So some of you may be wondering, well, what if we didn't have an expenditure for that item line, or we haven't spent any money yet there? You just simply put a 0 there. It will not let you submit it if you leave it blank. So if you do not have any funds or anything any expenses or expenditures to report for that particular section, just put a 0. Next section, grant program information, authorizing legislation. This grant program is authorized and it gives you that code. Won't read all of that, but it's pretty much telling you, that's giving you the actual grant official name that comes from the CDC to dishes to us. One point I want to make there, to be clear, this was an $800 million grant that Texas, the state of Texas, received. There was $10 billion sent nationally. Texas got $800 million based on student population. That $800 million went to DSHS, which is the Texas Department of School Health Services. DSHS then set up a subcontract with TEA, and that's how we were able to directly fund schools for this part of the grant. And so this money was funneled from the federal government, from the CDC, to the state health department, to TEA. So just so you all understand the structure of how this school health support grant is set up. We already talked about the grant period, pre-award through application submission date. Yep. Got it. And so pre-award, that's when people want to know what is pre-award. It's from May 1st of last year to when you submitted your application. So this application deadline was February 11th. So if you submitted February 11th, your pre-award goes from May 1st of last year to February 11th of this year. If you submitted it in January or November or December, rather, the first deadline, it's from May 1st to when you submitted your actual application to when you submitted your application. So I want to make sure we said that. Required federal funding, we've kind of already put that notice there, so I won't say that again. Name of the person submitting the report. This is the person, whether it's you yourself that's attending this or your designee in your district who's going to fill out this report. Someone asked or sent an email saying, does it have to be the point of contact on the application? It doesn't have to be, but it does need to be someone who you've given authority to, who knows the details of this grant, who can fill it out accurately. Meaning either you've given them all the information that they've needed, so you've printed this out in a PDF form, or you've walked them through it to let them know what to fill out, or you yourself are filling it out. But whoever fills this out, which is beneath their name, they need to be submitting accurate information. So whoever that is in your district who you authorize to do that, all we ask is that it's accurate information. Email address of the person submitting the report, their email address, just in case we have a follow-up question, or you ask and you want to know who submitted it and you're not the person, we have a record of their name and their email address, an active email address. So it should be their school authorized email address preferably. With that, next is phone number. It can be your business phone, a work phone number. It can also be your work cell phone number, or if you use another cell, but a number that if we needed to reach you in regards to this grant, the person who submitted it, that's an accurate phone number. With that said, we can move further down. LEA or private school grantee name. Search, so there's a drop-down menu here. You can search by your name, you can search by your CDN. You can type your name in, or you can scroll down. Only names that are populated here are those who actually applied and received the NOGA and were approved by this grant. So if you're a school district and you didn't apply for this grant, your name will not populate here. We pulled this down from Qualtrics, and that's how this was pre-populated. This was a safeguard we put in place to prevent folks who actually didn't apply for this grant to erroneously fill this out. So as you can see, he's searching by number, CDCN or ID number or vendor number. You can search by your name of your school, or you can just scroll down. Whatever floats your boat, whatever's best for you, but your names should be there. All right. So next one, expenditures by allowable uses of funds. Grantees must use this form to submit the required expenditure reports for the indicated expenditure reporting period noted above. Once again, that's that period May 1 through April 30th. May 1 of 2021 through April 30th of 2022. And cumulative, we said all these things before, but we were putting that language again just so it can be at the top of your mind as you're filling this out. Section 1.1, pre-award expenditures, PPE. So you'll see that this is broken down that way. First, we talk about pre-award. So what did you spend, or what are you trying to classify in terms of PPE from May 1 to when you submitted your application? You just put in the number. If it was $200, that's what you would put there. If it was for pre-award, but let's say you didn't use any for grant expenditures, after pre-award you didn't use it, then you just put a 0 there. Then we move on to hygiene and cleaning supplies. Matt, let's put a decimal in there just so they can see. $400.12. Do not have to put a dollar sign, none of that. We know that that's what this is for. That's for pre-award. So what did you use from May 1 to when you submitted the application? If it was $400.12 for hygiene and cleaning supplies, that's what you would put. And then this next section is from after you submitted your application to, there we go, application through March 31st. What all did you use then? So that's what this is showing. Quick question, Matt. Well, not question. I want to show them as you enter dollar amounts, you're going to see that there's a little arrow. It can go into negative numbers. We want to stay away from negative numbers because hopefully there's no reason to submit anything from a form for a negative amount. Everything you submit should be a positive amount. Should be at 0 or above. Should not be any negative amounts. If for some reason you're saying you have a negative amount, it shouldn't be, but let us know. That's a very interesting situation there. We would love to know what that would be. So it moves on to help with filtration systems, same kind of thing, pre-award, and then we go into grants. What you spent after the pre-award. Pre-award, once again, May 1st to when you submitted the application. And then the grant piece is what you spent from after the application submission to the 31st of the end of the grant period in terms of what you could spend. Same thing, it kind of goes to the same format for vaccines, for public health events. It will always do pre-award first and then the grant expenditures. This is modeled after the actual application. If you remember the application that you filled out, there was a pre-award column with all of these things. And then there was a expenditure regular grant time, a regular grant period column. This is what this is modeling. So you can put numbers for both sections. Notice he's putting a 0 for some areas, because that means you didn't actually have an expenditure for that section or for that amount. So you might have spent money in pre-award for PPE, but you didn't spend any after you submitted your application. That's fine. You would put a 0 there. We'll put money for the pre-award or vice versa. Or if you spent money for both, you would put both. So that's that. We want to stray away. He put a negative. We want to stray away from those negative numbers. Caught that. Keep it at this 0. So that is that section. Scroll up real quick, Matt. So that first section is expenditures by allowable uses of funds. That is what that section is for, modeled after the application. So you kept a negative number there. See this, yeah. Now we're going to expenditures by budget class object code, which is codes that you all are familiar with if you've done grants before or set by TEA, set within your district. These are those codes. This was also in the application, but this was the section after that other section that we just covered. So all of this is really modeled after the Qualtrics application. So the first section, once again, you're going to use cumulative dollar amounts, do not include special characters. Payroll, how much money did you use within this grant for payroll for staff? Professional contracted services, that's what you would put there. Supplies and materials, and there's a definition for all of those. Other operating costs, and then capital outlay. Matt, did you want to jump in on capital outlay and just define what that is again? Because I know sometimes there's questions about what that actually means.
Right, so it could differ, but even though this report form and the way we've paid this grant differ from what you're used to, we rely on all the same resources and information from the general and fiscal guidelines and the budget handbook. So we'll show those a little bit later as we get into questions, but keep in mind capital outlay, if you purchase anything that falls under that based off your district's threshold of 5,000, or it might be less than that, this is where you would basically be accounting for anything from those allowable uses in what might be considered capital outlay. So for this grant, this is a general example. Not to say this happens, but you may have had allowable items in HEPA or small items that are capitalized that may qualify under this. So it'll differ by each district, but these definitions are consistent with any of the resources and other grants you would see on our guidance resources. So that your best approach for folks, you probably know to reach out to your business office if you're new to grants or not familiar with what a capital outlay threshold is, but this is where you classify your grant, since we didn't do drawdown, by class object code.
Thank you, sir. So you put a number there as well, whatever that amount is, you put there. Want to pause here before we get into this next section. It's important that your numbers add up. Once again, similar to the Qualtrics report, Smartsheets doesn't calculate this for you to where you would put in your total amount and then you can put in your subcategories and then it makes sure that it adds up. So whatever numbers you're putting in here, they need to equal and add up to your actual expenditures. So whatever your budget was, whatever you spent, if you spent a total of $330,000, I'm just throwing out a random number, and so far you spent, or you're saying you're accounting for that total amount, then those numbers need to equal up to 330,000. So whatever you spent up until now, or that you've reclassified or spent or what have you, your numbers need to add up. And so we definitely suggest making sure you have a calculator, just making sure it equals, because that's when we run into issues, is when the numbers don't align and then we're having to go back and get resubmissions or triple check things. So just when in doubt, even use a calculator, we say, or have another person, have a couple of people review it before you submit. Well, we're going to get into this about erroneous submissions and what you do. So those are those two sections. That's the funding, the budgetary side, the expenditure side, modeled after the Qualtrics application. Now we get into here. There's been a couple of questions around indirect costs. So it says, check the box below if your organization claimed indirect costs for the grant program. So if you are, click that button, and then this happens. Once you click that button, because you're saying that you've claimed indirect costs, a new set of questions will appear. It then says, enter approved indirect cost rate for your organization below. Enter rates as a decimal. So if it's 5.05%, you would just equal 5.05. You do not have to put the percent sign or a dollar sign because those are special characters. To calculate the maximum indirect costs that can be claimed for a grant, complete the maximum indirect cost worksheet. So in case you need that reference, it is a hyperlink there. If you were to click on it, it's going to take you to a worksheet that guides you through those calculations and what you need to do. So we tried to provide that resource there for you. Did you want to click there, Matt, to show them? Yeah, it'll pop up into a Word document, I believe. Yeah. And then there's another document. Go ahead, Matt.
And I'm just going to mention, this is all taken pretty much verbatim from grant application. So it's the same resources you might see in a traditional grant application. If you're new to this grant or didn't apply or unfamiliar, it just links you to where your rates are, especially for folks that may have had trouble getting a hold of the original submission. You would go to the indirect cost rates here and you can double check that. So we just link it so you don't have to wonder where that is. But both the worksheet and this come from our grant application. So we're just embedding those resources for folks that have questions.
Yep. Okay. So we can go back to the, there we go. So that's there. And then it says indirect cost rate. So you put that there. Those are the two links. And then indirect cost amount. You enter the dollar amount as you would do above. Decimals for cents, no dollar sign, no percent sign. If it's $525.34, you just equal 525 decimal 34. So one is the percentage, one is the actual amount. So what percentage did you claim of indirect cost? And then what was the value, the dollar value, the dollar amount of that percentage that you've claimed? So if we scroll back up real quick, Matt, keep going now. If you don't click the button, so let's unclick that check, then it disappears. It won't be there. So that's only if you claimed indirect cost that those things would apply. And so we can click back on it, Matt, just so they can see it again. And then those things are there for you. So we'll scroll down and the information is still there. No expenditures to report. Great question. Well, what if we haven't spent anything as of yet that we need to report or that we've reclassified, or we just don't have anything so that's fine. What you would simply do is check this box if you have no expenditures to report for this expenditure reporting period or have not yet received a grant payment. If you check this box, you do not need to complete the previous sections of the report. Now, Matt, just to be sure, if I scroll all the way down and click on this box, will it take it or do I need to fill in zeros for those other areas?
It is still set up that we would prefer you to enter zeros, but that's part of why we put this at the end, not to make you work through this, but as an awardee with a NOGA, this information gets shared with our partners at Dishes. So and a good example to Damon's point, if you checked no expenditures and it accepts the report, we're going to report it as no expenditures, but this is just another check to go back through and also make sure you don't have dollar amounts and then claim no expenditure. So it should catch you at every section and you should stick to putting a zero in, especially if you have not yet received a grant of payment because we don't have a fully approvable amendment, or if you have nothing to report. Ideally, if you have received funds, you should or could be able to fill this report out with all of your cumulative costs and be done. If you did receive a grant payment and are considering reclassification or other things like that, you would also potentially use this and put zeros. This is just a check to say we did not receive any. So again, some imperfections in the form, but it's best to put zeros and check this off. Again, there's just a submit button and we anticipate monthly reports. So the best way to show you as reporting with nothing to report, so we're not questioned by our state funders, and we don't have to reach back out to you to make corrections, or we can at least minimize that. So
Got it. Thank you, sir. So once again, fill out the 0. Now, this is a really important button to click. Send me a copy of my responses. The reason you want to do that is pretty obvious, but I'll just state it. You want this to go to you if you filled it out. Now, some folks, if you might have someone filling it out, let's say you have an assistant filling it out, or your colleague filling it out who really doesn't have anything to do with this grant, but for efficiency wise, you have them fill it out. That's fine. But when it says send a copy of my responses, they can put in your email address so that they'll send the responses to you. Or if you wanted to go to them, that's fine, and then they can forward it to you if you need it. But we do have a button here or a section here for these responses to go directly to the person who has filled out, or to whomever wants this information. And then from there, you can further forward it to whoever you need. But that's just for your record's sake. You want to keep that. All right. You would press submit. It says, so then if you've not done something correctly, it'll let you know. So what's happened there is if you leave something blank, you're going to have to go back and do it. It won't take it because we've set it up so that it forces a response. So even if you're saying, well, we haven't spent anything, you just put zeros there. Fill out your name, but you want to make sure, we're trying to make sure that we avoid erroneous submissions as much as possible. So that's why we have that there. And then that'll be that. We do suggest before filling it out that you have all the relevant information that you need in terms of what you spent, all your expenditures and all that documentation with you so that you can do it and be as efficient as possible with your time versus having to pause or leave it or come back to it. I see Matt is also going to go to print. So you can also go to, you can save it as a PDF, or you can save your submission also to your computer if you want to save it and then print it out. So that's there as well. And what did you go to for that, Matt? Just to show them once again.
yeah, with Smartsheet, generally you want to stay in the browser, and I usually do a right click. So right click print. You could also, if this isn't a very long form, but you can go Control F in the form and look for sections. But I would always suggest right clicking in the web browser because it's a web-based report. But right click print. You could also, if you have a file tab, depending on your browser, it might change. But I would just stay in the form and right click to get those options.
And then that might be good because you might say, hey, I don't want to submit it yet. I just want to fill it out and have someone else review it. You could get to the end of it, print it, and then not submit it, have someone else review it or come back to it with fresh eyes and then go back and submit it or change some things up to make sure that it's accurate. So this is another option. If you do that right click, print into PDF, it allows you to review it again via paper before submitting it. So that's that. So that is the report. I'm going to go back now to share my screen, and we're going to now move into the Q&A section. We have a few FAQs we want to address, and then we'll open it up. I see we have 36 questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to reshare my screen here because we have about 5 anticipated questions that we anticipated getting rather. So here they are. So frequently asked questions. These are based on questions we've already gotten so far. Where do we record indirect costs? We just showed you at the bottom. As you get towards the bottom, you click that button that says I have indirect costs to report. You click it, and then a whole new section for percentage of indirect costs and amount of indirect costs pops up. You only need to click that button if you're claiming indirect costs. So it is embedded in the application.
Damon, I'm going to add a point to that. We added that feature. Some of you may have been ahead and already submitted it. We will have subsequent months of reports. If you submitted already and your numbers are solid, but you didn't have a place to report indirect, you can report a new cumulative next month versus resubmitting if you prefer to do that. As an oversight on our part, trying to make this model what you need to report. So if you have a report that's good and you followed your approved cost, your NOGA, and you're done, and you got ahead of that due date, but you'll have indirect and you left that off because you weren't sure, there will be, Damon, I think 1 or 2 more months in the closeout period of reporting. So this doesn't end unless you're fully done this month. And you can do that in the subsequent month.
To that point, this is like one of the last slides here, or the last slide. Just so you all know, to Matt's point, there'll be an April 30th, a May 30th, and then the final reporting date will be June 30th for the next reporting date. So it'll be the last day of the month. It might need to say May 31st, but we're trying to stick with May 30th. It might be May 31st. We might correct that date, but it'll pretty much be the 30th, 31st of every month. I might make that adjustment for May since there are 31 days in May. If any dates change, we will, or anything else in regards to reporting, we will communicate with all grant recipients. We have all of your email addresses who've applied. We'll let you know well in advance, like we did when we promoted these office hours. So just letting you know for those dates. If we received a NOGA but have not received a payment, am I still required to complete this reporting form? So, we already addressed that. Sorry. No, we haven't addressed that. Matt, you want to address that one?
So in the report, it has a no payment received, and that's how you would submit it. So if you haven't received a payment, your best course of action is to put all zeros and that no, have not received payment yet. Given the nature of this grant and how we've done payments, that's how you want to complete it if you haven't received a payment yet.
Got it.
So technically, yes, but you won't have numbers in a lot of those fields because you haven't expended or reclassed or anything like that.
Got it. So Matt, do I have the option to not submit anything if I haven't received a payment yet? Can I just not submit this month?
Yeah, and I'll let you add to the statement, but generally this is part of what's required for our expenditure reporting, and we report back to state dishes. So when someone doesn't submit a report, they typically ask us, why are only this many reporting? And then it just leads to more work and more reports and more emails. So if you want to cut down on your TEA emails and reminders, it's best to submit it with a no, and then we go to bat for those because of our payment system and how we've had to operate this short-term grant. So it's best to be heard, not unheard, so we don't have to reach back out and give you reminders or ask you why you didn't. Because we're going to be compiling this on a pretty short timeline to that due date to provide it to state health partners at dishes.
Yeah. All right. Outside of the monthly expenditure reporting form, are there any other reporting requirements for the school health support grant? At this time, there are not. This is your required reporting. If something were to come up, we would let you know, but this is where you need to do your reporting. I know I got a couple of emails about that. This is the beginning and the end of your reporting for this grant as of now. If things change, there's an update from the CDC or from dishes, we'll let you know. Next question, what other local documentation should I use to assist me in completing this report? Matt, I'll throw that your way. What other documentation should one use when they're completing this report?
So I'm actually going to answer this, and then as we get through it, I will kind of point to a few things and try to do this without sharing screen, but can certainly go back. So when you open this report, and let's assume you kind of PDF it, but you know the sections are similar, you will want a local copy of your last approved application. That can be a little bit difficult with this type of system, but what we have done, and if I can do this without, I think time-wise, we're good, Damon.
Yep.
I'm going to pull this up and then show an example.
I'll stop sharing.
We tried to make this work so that there are ways to identify your application. So the let me see if it's going to cooperate here. The NOGA, for everyone that's received a NOGA, has the identifier of your Qualtrics application that was approved right there. Realize this is very different. This NOGA looks different for those that have seen those, but because we had multiple submissions, corrections, amendments, which you all know we still work through, you would start with your NOGA. You would then keep this identifier. And the reason this is important is if you submitted the application and do not have a local copy, you can either search your email for this because our Qualtrics sent you a copy of it, and you'll have all of your information hidden somewhere in your email, which I know has been difficult for folks to find, but that will have your approved budget. You can work from that. If you use this identifier from your NOGA and you cannot find it, we have some of the folks on the call here, but it will be an email reach out for us to provide you the local, a copy because you don't have a local copy of your application. This will pull up an email copy and will have all of your amounts broken out based off what you submitted. This is the identifier of your app. This is like your application ID, and you want to work from your NOGA. So the local documentation you want is your NOGA, and then the tie to your application that you've submitted, which should be, barring spam filters or things like that, should have been sent to you the moment you submitted, no matter how long ago it was. And that's your identifier for the application. And that's why you can search the email to find it. Again, if you cannot find this, or you had multiple copies, or this program has changed hands, then you will need to reach out for a copy of your application, and we can provide it through link or attachment, but that is much more time consuming with 540 of these. So I know it's difficult with so many grants, but local documentation for any grant program should include you saving and maintaining a copy of all submissions. And that will also help you with, I think, for some of you who have done amendments and other things, to know that you can work from that submission. But again, if you submitted 4 or 5 times or made changes, this is the approved application that you would report based off of. So I'm going to pull this NOGA, I'm going to pull this, I'm going to search my email for that my local copy that was sent to me when I submitted. If I do not have those items, then you will want to email. You'll want to email, and we're still going to put it through COVID case report and just say, I need a copy of my approved application. I cannot find it. We're happy to do that, but full disclosure, that's what's taken the longest time with this grant. We know this isn't the most ideal system, but if you don't keep a copy of what was submitted and kind of versioning, you will be working from numbers that are very hard to identify. So work to your NOGA, use the application ID that ties to the submission, and that will lay out all of your budget by both allowable use of funds and class object code and what you were approved for. So a good scenario, and Damon's gotten used to my long answers, some of you may have too. I pull up my application, I'm submitting one report, I'm one and done. I've got all my cumulative numbers right there. If I didn't make any changes, I reclassed or used the funds, I'm going to finish with this report. It literally, if you did not make changes, can be as easy as pulling up your approved application, copying those numbers over, hitting submit, and you could be done.
Matt, can you all see my screen again? What do you all see?
Yeah, your questions are back up.
Okay. I always get thrown sometimes between sharing screens. Thank you for that. Last question here, and then we're going to jump into, we have about 42 questions. If I submitted information in error on a previously submitted report, meaning between when we opened it up until now, how do I correct it? If it's not the piece about indirect costs, and you want to, that's the piece that we said you can wait till next month and just do a cumulative. Outside of that, if you submitted something and you need to resubmit, if you submitted something in error, you need to correct it, just resubmit a new form. Just go in, go back to that link, resubmit it, and then we're going to take your most recent submission. So to restate that, when we go to pull this report on May 1, because the deadline is April 30th at 11:59. So when we pull this May 1, May 2nd, and we look at it, and let's say there's 3 submissions from, since my name is Damon ISD, I'm just throwing it out there. We're going to look at the timestamp, and the latest one, so the last one that they submitted, will be the one that we use as the actual submission. So just letting you know, that's the one we're going to pull. If you submitted multiple times, it's the most recent one that you submitted. With that said, I think we are done with our frequently asked questions. And so now we're going to do Q&A. We're going to answer as many questions as we can about the report. If we get through all of them, we'll jump into general questions about the school health support grant. So I'm going to go to the Q&A section. I'm going to go to the very top. Is there an extension to the spending of the funds? Matt, you want to take that one, or you want me to take that one?
You'll probably correct me. We think, but we do not have an extension date for this grant. We've worked towards one since the start of this grant. We don't have anything definitive. But again, we'd be communicating as soon as we're able to for anyone. But right now, there's no extension to this grant, hence the reporting in this liquidation period. I think that's pretty much spot on, Damon. Correct me, I might be.
No. I mean, that's spot on in terms of extending it, extensions of this. I will throw this out there because this might be a question because I want to be very specific. If your extension for this year, now if you're asking about next school year, when we have information available in terms of next school year and funding being extended until next school year and beyond, as soon as we have that information, we'll share that out with everyone, because that doesn't just have implications for the school health support grant. It also has implications for the K-12 COVID-19 testing program with the vendors. And so it have implications on both sides of the $800 million total grant. So we did that. What is the procedure to return unused funds? Madam, will let you.
So the procedure will be that we will, you'll either, an LEA at a certain time in the future, which I'll get back to, you would either say we have unspent funds, we need information to return them, but it would essentially be a refund. We will provide additional information about returning unused funds, but we will not be requiring that until we get through this liquidation period or further into it because of some of the uncertainty of extensions and other things of that nature. So a couple of things to keep in mind. We know you don't want to hold funds you're not going to use. There are some other things we will talk about in terms of reclassification and other options, but we will not be seeking refunds at this stage yet as we go through a few months of reporting, and there's a potential for new developments in the grant. So we would reach back out to primary and secondary contacts at the time we're having you look back based off a final expenditure report and request refunds at that stage. Maybe sooner, but at this stage, you won't see anything from us requesting that you return unused funds right now, as we're still kind of in reporting. The other thing I wanted to add, Damon, for folks that are in grants, and if you're not aware of this, you want to reach out to your business office. These types of funds being paid the way they are, if they should, I think generally should be put in a fund that accrues interest. You want to be mindful of program income. So you do need to track any interest gained from the funds that you received. And that's something we'll provide kind of in future guidance along with refund language as well.
Got it. Thank you, Matt. When does the liquidation period end? Is it April 30th or May 31st? As of now, it's May 31st.
It's actually June, and that was on us.
Yeah.
Recently, November of last year, we extended closeout. So the original correspondence gave you May, but we actually have a July closeout for TEA, and we will have some reporting dates, but you get a full 90 days that would take you from April, May to the end of June. So it's a 3-month closeout, as it should be with almost all of our federal grants now, given changes in grant guidance last year.
So we communicated May 31st, but we need to go back and update that.
Yeah, and with the recording and everything else, we will be putting out more guidances on this information and as things change, correct?
Yeah. I received a NOGA March 14th, but still do not have the funds. Who can I reach out to?
So again, if you received a NOGA, you should have also received a request to make corrections. Those that have a NOGA and no funds, I can speak generally that generally we had fields incomplete or amounts that did not match. We are batch reviewing and approving these. So if you received a NOGA March 14th and you have not received or completed any corrections, then you can reach back out to COVID case report. But we sent out NOGAs and a direct link to all the schools we had listed to make corrections. Again, this gets back to local documentation. General errors that we have to have resolved by the LEA to make that payment tend to be math errors because of the form reporting or totals that are just left blank. Unfortunately, as you know, with grants, you have to request a dollar amount. So as we batch approve these, we just have a lot of fields that folks are still leaving blank. And I think local documentation would help you. So Lynn, thanks for the question. If you are lost and you did not complete any changes since your NOGA or any corrections, you can reach out to COVID case report. We will batch those and have someone follow up and try to pinpoint errors and get you that link. But we review those weekly. And just to give you an idea, in our first round, we had, I think, about 80 submissions and only 4 that were still correct. So we still have this issue of the math from the allowable use of funds to the budget, the class object code issue. It's the same issue we could have in this report if you're not checking your numbers. Allowable uses have to equal your class object code. You have to report it 2 separate ways. So COVID case reports the email if you're lost, but you want to look for that NOGA email. There's a link in there. If you have not completed corrections, that's what's holding up your payment. And I think we've received more. So we look at those every week to process more changes and make more payments.
Definitely suggest as you're adding up those numbers to use a calculator or maybe have someone else just triple check, because in moving through, you might think what you submitted is correct, but as you go through, it happens, things get misaligned and numbers don't necessarily add up. Moving forward, okay, scroll up. If we did not allocate any funds in the pre-award section in the application, can we still amend or do we simply report out a pre-award and the monthly expenditure report?
So it'll be an extra step here. Good question, David. You technically need to do both. You would report in the monthly you could report in the monthly expenditure with pre-award included. And then you need to go back into a link and submit it as an amendment. With this grant, we don't follow every one of the thresholds and the amendments because we're paying you in advance without drawdown. So you really need to capture every change in an amendment submitted to TEA to cover you for those changes. So in this case, you did not allocate in pre-award. You should amend, and you should also fill out the expenditure report and you'll be good to go. The amendments take a little bit longer to process because we're still working through payment corrections. So I know many say, when will my amendment be approved? If you're just moving funds among those allowable uses in class object codes, generally you're not going to be requesting anything that's unallowable. So you would actually do both. You always want to have an amendment on file just for coverage in case of an audit. And if you don't have that link or you're not sure where to go, again, COVID case report and just say, I need a link for the amendment. But generally, the amendment link has been an active one we've shared throughout, but we can get that to you if you have questions or you're stuck where to go.
Thank you. Does this grant allow ISDs to move funds between expense categories, i.e. from 6,200 to 6,300? If so, is there a limit to this? Is there a limit similar to the 25% variance for other grants?
Good question. Kind of relates to the last one, Shannon. There are no percentage thresholds. Part of this is because of the nature of how we pay the grant. So you must amend if you move anything from what was approved. I realize that could be very minor dollar amounts, but to be on the right side of potential audit or monitoring, you should submit an amendment if you change anything from what was approved and at least have that on file with us. Again, an amendment form is going to be a little else than another online form where you're moving dollar amounts from class object codes. So you can make those changes. You want to do it within liquidation period. And you would do it for any change. So there's no percentage threshold like there are in other grants because we don't have the same scenario with drawdown and in other checks and balances here. So any change should go through amendment, and your best course of action is to submit an amendment before that closes that liquidation. We'll leave it open till June, but it's best course of action to do it at least a month before and to kind of settle on your decisions and not make changes. So you should still file that amendment.
Got it. In regards to the monthly report due on May 1st, are the expenditures to be reported as of March 31? When you say May 1st, I'm assuming you mean April 30th. Will there be another report for expenditures liquidated as of the 30th? So that's why I put up this slide. There'll be another report due May 31st, and then another report due June 30th, which will be the last report for this grant cycle year in terms of 2021, 2022. Matt, did you want to add anything there?
No, I think our date of the 1st is when we start pulling the data. So I think Damon's got the report dates on there. So this is just a matter of when we have it due and when we're actually going to go in to pull the information, and we'll kind of be limited in changes. And I think the next question, will this be the only report, or can we do reporting revisions? You could report a change or a revision at that May 31st or June 30th. We're leaving it open because some may close out sooner, some may not have revisions. So to Shannon's other question, you would just submit in the next month when we open it, any revisions if you come out of the April 30th and you have changes to make. So it's about 3 opportunities, right, Damon? And that final is June 30th.
Yes.
So anyone could go back in for that final if you had changes after.
Yeah. Well, yes, this has been recorded already. We are going to post this. Got to get over to our media team, but we'll get this posted on our website, and we can also send it out via the listserv, so you all have a copy of the recording to refer to. So thank you for that question, Dr. Durman. Kim Blaylock. So do we include expenditures for supplies that have not been received yet, encumbered only, on the report?
So I'm going to actually tackle this, Damon, with the next 2 questions for this grant. And this is not popular guidance, but it's factual guidance. The March end date would have been for receipt of supplies and materials. So technically with this grant, pending any extensions or items, other information we don't have, anything encumbered only, not received, wouldn't qualify for this grant based off that end date, which is consistent with our guidance. At this stage, you would only report expenditures on this. So again, I said I was going to tackle 2 questions here. The next question was, I thought this had to be spent by March 31st. You have until June 30th for closeout and liquidation. So this means a couple of things: supplies, materials, those all should have been received, and you should be able to demonstrate some benefit to the program beneficiaries by that date of March 31st. Again, not our preference, that's the end date of the grant. The next 3 months aren't really dates to expend, but if you are considering reclassifying allowable costs or finishing your closeout or liquidation, that's what the dates from April 1st through end of June are. So technically, no, if you haven't received the supplies materials, there's still a possibility you cannot charge those to this grant if we don't have some type of extension. If that's brand new information to folks, happy to talk with you, but that's consistent with our general and fiscal guidelines for every grant, and can kind of cite that. That information has been included when your NOGAs are sent to you. It's not ideal. It has limited many schools in making new purchases, but those are the facts of what we've had to deal with this grant and this timeline so far. So that kind of answers both those questions. Not that you're the only ones that have this, but Kim or Olivia, COVID case report, if you want to discuss this further or have questions. Again, back to Damon's point, if we have any ability or any news for grantees about extending the current cycle, we would share that, and that could change that answer. But for now, it can't be encumbered only. For the grant, it wouldn't be allowable in the project period that ends that ended March 31st.
Got it. So to be clear, Matt, is what is being reported April 1? What is being reported April 30th through June 30th? I want to make sure.
So it's expenditures. So if you, well, I'll use kind of general terms, but if you purchased or procured supplies, materials, or anything according to the guidelines of the grant and before March 31st and expended those funds, you would report them. If you weren't able to do that, but you were able to reclassify to other allowable costs, which we can also kind of dive into and will with future guidance, you could report that as well. A previous question said, hey, we spent all the money and we haven't been paid yet. When you receive those funds, you could reclassify those reasonably to those items you already paid for. You're recording expenditures here. So this next statement might be a little bit off, but to try to kind of give you an idea, this should be similar to what you would put in an ER drawdown system. This should be expended only at this stage. Encumbered would not qualify under this grant, barring some change in the end date. So it's expenditures, and that's why it's an expenditure report, not encumbered, not planned. So in that case, if you don't have any actual expenditures, you would put nothing to report. And then if you need additional guidance or you're not seeing that guidance we provided with the NOGAs, you could reach out to COVID case report and we'll get you to the right queue, and we could potentially do other QA sessions or meet with folks if you have questions.
Got it. I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to get to as many questions as we can. Are we reporting expenditures? We kind of already touched on that from Tara Thompson. We're good with this one, correct?
Yeah, it's paid for this report. Yeah, and if you have further questions about decisions to make with the funding, things of that nature, we can discuss that if you have more questions.
What section of the monthly expenditure report do we enter? There's a button when you click indirect costs, it'll pop out percentage and amount of indirect costs. So that's been added. If you go back in there and see it, it's towards the end of the reporting form. We have recorded expenses, but still not received a penny of revenue. Should we submit a blank form? I mean, we touched on this earlier, Matt. You want to?
Yeah, this is not related to any definition of expenditure for ESSER. This is not the ESSER grant. So you stick to the guidance of the grant. This is expended. This is a CDC grant. Any reference to ESSER with expenditures, you don't want to confuse that with ESSER annual reporting or any other definition or consideration of expenditure for this grant. So just to be clear that this is not ESSER. This is an expenditure report with an end date that already happened. ESSER grants haven't all necessarily ended by that date. So the compliance and the end dates are very different. So for expenditure for this, it's going to be funds you actually expended, or it would be funds, and it would always be expended, or it could be expended that you're going to reclassify, or that you expended before that March date, pending any changes to end dates that we receive, we're able to share for any extensions or relief on the timeline. So for this report, the definition of expenditure is you expended the funds.
Got it. Real quick, Matt, I want to be clear too here for folks because maybe some folks joined a little bit late. If you did not, if you got a NOGA, but you did not get funds, do you fill it out? You can put 0 throughout the report And then next month or the following month, once you receive your actual funds, you can then put money in those expenditure sections for those who have not received funding yet. Just to confirm, the unrestricted rate is allowed for this grant.
No, this is the restricted rate. So it when it pulls to it, it is your restricted rate from your cognizant agency. If you're an LEA, your cognizant agency is TEA, and that rate is listed. It's not an unrestricted rate.
Got it. We have expensed all of the funds reported here. Okay, we get that. There's pre-award and let me screw it up. Okay, we've done that. Close pre-award and submission of the date. Whatever. Does pre-award end on submission date? Yes, pre-award ends on the date that you submitted your application. We budgeted money to the pre-award item was spent the regular grant cost item. Is that allowed?
Yeah, that's allowed. That would be an amendment. Oh, it would be an amendment, and also maybe something you would update in your expenditure reporting this month or the next.
Got it.
Damon, well, I got two more at the top that were voted up that I think we've already answered, but what is being reported April, June, if March is cut off? March is a cutoff for the grant end date. April, May, June are all liquidation or closeout periods consistent with closeout periods in other grants. So we typically have an expenditure report date and a final and a revised expenditure report date in traditional grants. We're affording you the same 3 months that we're required to by federal statute to have closeout. So it could be you're reporting changes in your expenditures from what was planned. But this is expenditure reporting consistent with other grants. That's what's being reported. We don't have you report expenditures or require it necessarily in the same way in this grant.
Yeah. We recorded expenses to this grant, but still have not seen it. Okay, we talked about already answered that.
Yeah, that would be a blank and a nothing received, correct, until we get the correct application and can process the payment.
Got it. Items that we've purchased using our inventory account 1310 eligible for reimbursement.
So I would have to look at 1310. I don't know if that's something that Roger is comfortable answering. Has joined us, but generally, if you're reporting something different than what is in the expenditure report or those traditional class object codes, it's not necessarily approvable. Roger, 1310.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that either. I would have to look at it up. You know, is this a charter school that's asking the question?
It might be. Claudia, we would need you to send that. You can actually send that again with the name of the school to COVID case report, but generally it's got to fit in the allowable uses of funds and those standard 5 class object codes. Is kind of the best answer we can give right now without some more specifics and more guided technical assistance.
Got it. Okay. Let's get in 2 more and then I think we'll have to conclude. Can we include pre-award expenses paid from ESSER funds and reclassify funds used?
So I'm going to say generally, yes, there's an option to reclassify, and Roger's been kind enough to provide some guidance that I'm going to pull up, but I'm going to give him a chance to kind of come on and speak to this. He's our resident expert on reclassification of funds.
Okay, so there's going to be 2 scenarios where, you know, if you have any expenses in the previous year, say 2021, and as a pre-award cost, then those are the ones you basically would not reclassify in 2022 because of the difference in fiscal year. So in that case, you would basically draw down the money or you're already getting the reimbursement. That reimbursement will go back to the original funding source, and you would only you would have a reconciling note in your schedule of federal expenditure awards. In your single audit, you would actually identify, let your independent auditor know that these expenses were in the previous year, and all we are trying to do is, you know, getting the reimbursement, and it goes back into the same account that you originally paid from. Now, if you have expenses in 21, 22, those you can just reclassify them to this new CDC funding, because you know they are still in the current year. And so if you have, let's say you paid with local funds or any other federal funds, you can easily reclassify them to this new funding account. So 2 scenarios: before the 2021 expenses versus 21-22 expenses.
And Roger, generally, we think with this grant, again, it's general, that most are likely to fit in everything's in the current fiscal year because our pre-award goes back to May of last year. So there is reclassification. And that's also why if schools are asking, what can we do if we couldn't have purchased anything by March is there is allowability within ESSER to do a reclassification, but again, it has to fit Roger's general scenario. It would have to fit, which also fits the dates of this grant, and it would have to be allowable in this grant and in ESSER, which this one's much more restrictive. But between hygiene and cleaning supplies and everything else, like it is more than likely that some of these 8 allowables are also covered under ESSER, which is much more broad. So you could recoup some costs from ESSER before you determine you can't use these grant funds.
Yeah. Got it. We're over time. Last question, and then we'll close out. We can pull this into an Excel file and answer these questions, and then send them back to you. So we'll have to do that. I submitted a budget amendment a few weeks ago, but did not receive funds, nor did I receive a final NOGA. Can I report expenditures based on the amended budget?
You don't report if you haven't received payment. So if it's in an amendment form, if it was a few weeks ago and it was a change, you can reach out to COVID case report, but generally every week we're looking at new submissions, but that would depend on you following the link from your NOGA, and then we have to check. So if it was a few weeks ago, it's likely we still have errors we have to get back to, or we just haven't been able to process it yet. So no payment received. You do not have to submit expenditures. You can choose to, but if you haven't received a payment, we're recommending you put nothing received yet, but we'll be doing this through the subsequent May and June months and still processing payments.
The only thing I'll add on to that is all NOGAs, from my knowledge from working between operations and our grants team, have been sent. If you didn't by chance get it, definitely Isabel would love to get, Barbosa would love to get your school's name so that we can verify the NOGA and who it was sent to, because I believe we sent them to all schools at this point, unless there was an oversight. But I want to say 100% of schools, even if they didn't receive payment, have received a NOGA. So I'll say that and leave that there. Any final thoughts, Matt?
I was just going to say, since we're about to close and without questions, if folks are able to, if they think this was helpful, and in the next 2 months, if you would like more guidance in a Q&A session from grants on expenditures or items like that, just hit the raise hand real quick in the last few minutes and we'll do a count. But I'm guessing folks might find this helpful. But again, we still need that April report, right, Damon? We don't want you to have to answer other questions. So we work with what we have here, and then we can look at a potential another QA session in the next month to work with folks, because we know you send a lot of emails, have a lot of questions, and need additional guidance. So,
and what we'll probably do, considering that we ran out of time today, is we may make the next one 90 minutes, and you can fall off, if you have no more questions or you don't feel like it's relevant towards the end. But I want to do our due diligence to make sure we answer as many questions live as we can. We still have about 30 something that were not able to be answered here. So we're going to go through and have to send out those individual emails. But thank you all for participating. This has been recorded. We'll get this posted. Have a great rest of your week. And we look forward to continue to support you with this grant throughout the remainder of the school year. Thank you. Bye.